The amnesty hearings in Port Elizabeth was told last week that youth leader Siphiwe Mthimkhulu was poisoned while in detention. This coming week, evidence will be led that another Eastern Cape activist, Sizwe Kondile, was drugged by the security police. The use of poison and other specially developed chemicals was one of the most evil ways in which opponents of the former government were attacked and killed. Indeed, the image of scientists experimenting in their Pretoria laboratories with poison meant for human beings bring memories of doctors like the evil Dr Mengele. And yet, nobody has been prosecuted for this. The use of poison and chemicals against political opponents did not originate in South Africa. The Rhodesian police and army used it on a large scale against liberation fighters in Zimbabwe. A favorite method was to soak clothes in toxic organophosphates and distribute it in villages known to be supportive of guerrillas. Hundreds of people died this way. In April 1989, the then Secretary General of the Council of Churches, Frank Shikane, nearly died when he was poisoned. Apparently organophosphates were used in his clothes. An investigation into this attack by the Pretoria Attorney General's Special Task Team is nearing completion, 8 years afterwards.
And I had that attack 3 times over 3 weeks in Wisconsin, and the doctors were investigating as to what the cause would be. And ultimately, they were able to detect that through tests, investigations, and research, that there was some form of chemical which was in my system. And that's when they then ordered that all my baggage, personal effects be removed by the FBI. And then I had to get new clothes, and that was the only way in which the attack stopped.
Former Vlakplaas boss Dirk Coetzee declared in 1989 already that he fetched poison from the head of the forensics laboratory, General Lothar Neertling, in 1981, and gave it to 2 activists, Vusi Mavuzo and Peter Dlamini. Neertling denied this and said he never developed poison, a statement later contradicted by several other witnesses. A former state prosecutor says Neertling boasted to him that he had developed a substance which would bring on a heart attack and not be detected. We know that a number of ANC activists and guerrillas had died after swallowing poison injected into food and drink and distributed to ANC camps in Tanzania, Angola, and Mozambique. But the best documented case of a very sophisticated poisoning was Siphiwe Mthimkhulu. The policemen who last week asked for amnesty for killing Mthimkhulu denied that they were responsible for the poisoning.
Did you administer poison to Mr. Mthimkhulu, or do you know about anybody? No, I don't know. So they were included with that. You also didn't give him poison? No, I didn't. Definitely not.
Dr. Francis Ames was head of the University of Cape Town's neurology department when a severely ill Mthimkhulu was sent to her at Groote Schuur Hospital in November 1981.
He was on discharge after 5 months in prison with only the police having access to him. He was ill immediately after discharge. His family in Port Elizabeth were extremely distressed. He was childlike with pain, actually crawled into their bed that night, weeping with pain, and seemed strangely confused in his behavior. He clearly had neurological involvement, not only of the brain, but also of the nerves affecting his limbs, particularly his legs. We, having had experience of arsenical poisoning, examined his hair repeatedly for arsenic, and like the Port Elizabeth group, continually failed to find it. Fortunately for him, he survived long enough to develop a pathognomonic sign of thallium poisoning, which is falling out of the hair. We had great difficulty in actually setting up the tests for thallium. We had to supply, invoke the help of the organic chemists at UCT, and he was, once tested, he was unequivocally poisoned with thallium.
Tell me about thallium. Why is it such an efficient poison to use on a human being?
Yeah. Well, it's known as the homicide's dream drug. It's colourless, it's odourless, it's tasteless. The symptoms don't develop for at least a day, sometimes longer, after it's been ingested.
Could you have gotten in the poison any other way, like by accident through food or in getting in touch with something?
Not at all. The only people who had access to him were the security police. The relatives were never allowed to visit. And a quite extraordinary fact is that South Africa was virtually the only Western country that never permitted thallium in rodenticides. It's so toxic that it's been used as a rodenticide and is still in use in the Middle East before people realized its dangers. But extraordinary that South Africa had never permitted it. So the idea that a thallium-infected rat could have entered his cell is ridiculous.
To your mind, is there any doubt that Siphiwe Mthimkhulu was poisoned by the security police?
None at all. None at all. I was told by the professor of forensic pathology, who phoned me when the case got a lot of publicity. He phoned me to say the forensic department, in particular Lothar Neertling, wanted to congratulate my department on making the diagnosis, and could they have my permission to get specimens of the patient's urine and blood and hair, because they had acquired sophisticated equipment at the military laboratory and wanted to see how well it worked. I said certainly, as long as we were told the results so that we could correlate them with ours, and waited several weeks. I didn't get any results. I asked the forensic pathologist, and he said, would you believe it? Those specimens were dropped on their way to the airport.
Dirk Coetzee was the main witness against General Lothar Neertling when he sued me for defamation after the expose about the use of poison. Eugene de Kock and his Vlakplaas men decided to kill Coetzee and sent him a bomb in a tape recorder. The bomb later killed lawyer Becky Mlangeni. At the amnesty hearing in Port Elizabeth this week, Eugene de Kock added an interesting new twist to this saga.
And the bomb was sent to him whilst he was in Zimbabwe, long before he went to England. Yes, he was in Zambia. And the way I understood it, they wanted to prevent him arriving in England to testify against General Neertling.